Hello YouTube, welcome back to KT Replicas. My name's Caden, and today we're going to be making a custom Mandalorian helmet. I'm really happy with how the fit and the paint job on this helmet turned out, and I'm excited to show you the whole process from start to finish. Hopefully you enjoyed the journey as much as I enjoyed building it, and without further ado, let's go back to the beginning. Alright, today's the beginning of a really big project that I've had planned for a little bit now. Today's primary focus for this video will be this helmet right here, but it's a part of a much larger project that will be split across multiple videos. Probably just going to make a series about my suit that I will be making of Mandalorian armor. So this armor is from Galactic Armory, as most of my files are. It is the Mandalorian Strength armor. I will be linking it in the description below. Now that we can finally get started on the project, like everything I've done on this channel so far, it's going to start with a lot of sanding. To start off, make this process easier, I'll be using a powered detail sander. You do not need this to be successful with things like this. Luckily, this helmet was able to print in one piece on my helmet and still fit on my head, actually, really well. So I will not have to deal with very major seam lines or connection points that didn't line up perfectly well, just primarily the layer lines at the top of the helmet and any sort of VFAs that show up around the helmet, which are those little print lines. So yeah, to start off, I'm going to be using 180 grit sandpaper on this detail sander, and then from there, we're just going to feel it out. So let's get started. All right, so after about 30 minutes of attacking this helmet with some pretty rough grit sandpaper, I'm using 180. I hit it with the power detail sander for most of these large surface area parts right here, and then afterwards I went in with just a piece of sandpaper and hand sanded down a lot of the rough edges that either this created or were left over after I was done with the detail sander. So now I'm going to get into a portion where I clean off the helmet because it's covered in dust. And then we're going to hit it with its first can of filler primer. So let's get started with that. And for this, I'm just using a wet paper towel and a clean microfiber cloth. Alright, now that we've got this helmet sanded down to a pretty nice state where nothing screaming out to me as I run my hand across it, but obviously a rough finish, we're going to get to the next step of the process with filler primer. For this process, I'm going to be using Seymour's filler primer, which I will link in the description below. And of course, don't forget your respirator. Let's get to it. You want to be really generous with how much filler primer you're putting on at this stage, because at the end of the day, it's all just going to get sanded off anyways. Now that we've got our first coat of filler primer on this thing, it already looks so much better than it did when it started. This top piece of layer lines is, just wow, that's all I can say. But there's still plenty of work to be done, and for that, we're going to be using some Bondo glazing and spot putty. Bondo is a toothpaste-like consistency it's a filler that you put on top of most of your thicker layer lines, like the ones on the brow right here, or on the crown. And, any other deformations that you can see, like I have a little, maybe like a mini layer shift that happened along here. But yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be smearing it along these lines. We're not going to go too crazy, just focus on what we can see right now, and then we'll see where we get. Let's get started. Make sure you're being careful with Bondo and you're using the right PPE, because getting this stuff on your hands or in your lungs is not good for you. So now that we've got a decent amount of filler on this helmet, it's time to hit it for its second round of sanding. As you can see on the top, the layer lines at the top are, barely, if at all, visible, as well as the ones right here and here. There are a couple that I noticed in this lighting that I might have to get on later, but we'll see how this next round of sanding goes.
Something I had to learn through this process was that the goal is not to get rid of all of the Bondo. You don't want to sand too aggressively because it'll set you right back to square one where we just started. Here you can see me filler priming the helmet again. At this point, it really is just repeating the same steps of priming, sanding, and checking the surface. Each round I move up to a higher grit of sandpaper until I'm happy with the finish, which for me was about 400 grit.
Alrighty, it is now the end of the day since I started working on this, and this is actually going really smoothly. Probably just because of the fact that it was printed in one piece. It makes things go a lot smoother. There's a lot less stuff to worry about and a lot less times over that you're doing filling and sanding. So now we are approaching the last step of my sanding process, and that is wet sanding. There are a lot of different ways to do this. Big channels like the Galactic Armory use a bucket full of water and they just sand in that bucket. I don't feel like doing all that. I usually just grab a spray bottle, spray wherever I want to sand it down. Once it starts to dry out, I spray again, and then I repeat the process. But like I said, there are so many different ways to do this. You can even just dump water in the thing if you really want to. So yeah, let's just get this going and maybe I can get a coat of paint on it tonight. We'll see.
Although it's a bit messier, wet sanding really helps you keep the sandpaper from clogging and reduces scratches on the surface of the helmet, which leaves you with a much smoother finish in the end.
Alrighty, now that I've reached a decent stopping point for the helmet today, I'm going to work on these earpieces. I originally thought I was going to get a coat of paint on the helmet tonight, and then I realized I never got the paint. Happens. But that does give me time to focus on these ear greeblies that I have kind of been putting off working on. So let's get started on these.
Just like with the helmet, I want to be starting with 180 grit on these earpieces and sanding all the way up to 400 with coats of filler primer in between. As you can see here, I glued bamboo skewers to the inside of the earpieces where they won't be visible in the final product. This gives me something to hold on to while painting so I don't have fingerprints in the filler primer and ruin the finish. The name of the game with these earpieces was to be slow and methodical because they are relatively detailed and getting in those crevices can take a little while.
Alrighty, it is now the next day and I'm going to be getting started on painting this thing. So to start off, I'm going to be using some Rust-Oleum flat black for this base coat. I think I'm going to do a few. First one's going to be pretty light, nice tack coat, and then a couple more after that to just make sure we got everything covered. Going to be doing the exact same black on the small greebly pieces for the ears as well, so you will see that as well. Let's get started.
Now this first coat is pretty light on purpose because I want it to promote adhesion down the line, because the helmet is just smooth enough that if you spray too heavy, the paint will start to run. I'm also making sure to stay within this helmet's recoat time, while also giving it time to dry out so I'm not flooding the helmet with too much paint at once, because that can mess up how it dries.
Now that it's been 24 hours since the paint job, we can finally get to taping and getting towards the last coats of paint that will be going on this helmet. So my plan for this is to take this brow piece as well as the faceplate right here, and I'll be painting it a gunmetal gray color. I'll be showing that off later. But right now I need to tape off the pieces that I obviously don't want paint getting on, and for that I will be starting with this super thin tape, which is super useful for going over the curved parts of the helmet, as a lot of the times when you have thicker tape it doesn't want to follow the curves of the helmet well, so this is a great place to start. And then from there I will be using this, which is just your standard green frog tape, and then we will see how that goes. So let's get started on it.
This is another step where it really pays off to take your time. A good tape job makes for a good paint job. Make sure your tape lines up cleanly with the edges you're masking, and don't be afraid to pull it up and redo it if it doesn't look quite right.
Alrighty, so got the tape on. As you can see, I used tape down here entirely, but then I used some plastic saran wrap to help with the larger surface areas that I don't want to waste a lot of tape on. So, yeah, so here is where we are currently. This is going to be gunmetal and this is going to be gunmetal. So that is the focus. Now, as mentioned earlier, the base coat on this helmet is Rust-Oleum's flat black. And the next portion of the helmet, which is going to be gunmetal, will be Rust-Oleum's Universal Matte Metallic Gunmetal Gray. Here is what the two paints look like. If I could get a focus on that. So this is the gunmetal gray, this is the black that's currently on the helmet. So they will be on top of each other just like that. So I really like this one. This is one of the few Rust-Oleum metallic paints that don't have glitter looking stuff in it. So I think it turned out great. This is the metallic gunmetal on top of a black base coat. So this is what it should look like whenever we're done. So let's get going.
When it comes to metallic coats like these, it's always better to do several light coats instead of a few heavy ones. Light passes help prevent runs and give the paint a much smoother and more even finish.
Okay, now that we've got that last coat of gunmetal on there, it is time to peel the tape. You do want to do this relatively soon after your your last coat of paint has been put on the helmet, because if you wait too long, you'll risk of peeling it off. So I'm going to try to be super careful with what I'm touching. Like, I already got dust on my fingers, so I'm trying to be really careful about what I'm touching and get this tape peeled off. So let's get this done.
When peeling the tape, make sure to go slowly and carefully. Pull it back on itself at about a 45-degree angle to avoid lifting any of the paint. The main goal here is to take your time and keep those paint lines clean and fresh, preventing damage on that paint job you just worked so hard on.
First look with the paint peeled off, with the tape peeled off, and this is just incredible. It's crooked on the helmet stand, but I don't even care. I'm too scared to even touch it anymore. It turned out so nice. Super pumped about this. So now we are in our 24-hour waiting period again, where I would like to wait for the gunmetal to dry. And then from there, we will start on the accessory work. So while this dries, I'm definitely going to get started on the ears shortly, but I need to put this inside because I don't want anything messing with this paint job. So I'm going to do that, and I will be back. All right, it is time to get some work done on these ears. So my idea with this is to get a weathered, roughed up look, as if I was touching it all of the time and, starting to wear off this black paint and show some of that Beskar that's underneath. And to achieve this look, thanks to my dad for this idea, I'm gonna be using some Rub and Buff. Now, I've worked with this stuff before. It is extremely sensitive. You need to be very delicate with how you handle it. You need to be really light with the amount that you're using at one time. So thankfully I've used this once before on a Mandalorian helmet, and I found out how much is too much and how much is too little. So hopefully I can get that knowledge to translate over onto these, and I can have some really nice looking weathering. So let's get started on it.
Like I mentioned earlier, you want to be really cautious with your application, since a little bit goes a very long way with Rub and Buff. As you can see here, I'm just dry brushing the high points and any points of contact that I would be making if I were using these. The point is not to make these look like they've been through 600 battles, but it's to make it look like it's been worn. Alrighty, got these basically done. I
think they look pretty nice for what I was going for. So I think they're gonna be a really nice contrast to have on the side of the helmet. Definitely a different color since I did a dark gray, and having that silver kind of jumping out at you would look pretty cool. So I guess the next step later on is to weather the actual helmet, and then I will attach these and clear coat everything. Well, maybe a different order, but we will see. But next up is weathering the helmet, and I will get to that tomorrow when the gunmetal dries. So see y'all tomorrow. Okay, I kind of lied, but not on purpose. It's the next night, if you can't tell. Sorry about the lighting. Here's the helmet. It's still up and cooking. Can you focus, please? Great, that's about as good as it's gonna get. It's still here, but I forgot that before I weather, I am I've read, supposed to use some gloss clear. So while I'm out here, I'm gonna get that on super quickly, and then we'll actually get to the weathering process. So let's get started on that.
Now the reason why I'm clear coating before weathering is so I don't damage the helmet's actual finish when applying the weathering effects. And here's what it looks like after the gloss. Now it's time to actually get started on the weathering, and to begin, I will be using some rub and buff. Just like with the ears, I'm going to be using the same sponge brush just so I can attack the high points of the helmet, like right here where the visor is going to be at, as well as the top of the visor, the forehead, the brow, and even the cheeks. These are the high points of the helmet that are most likely to get damaged by contact. To cap off the weathering, I'm going to be doing a traditional black wash with the cheapest paint that I could find at my local stores, and I will be using this kind of sponge brush to apply it. It'll be applied primarily along the grays because that'll be where the black wash shows through, and then I will wipe it off with a towel. As I work on the weathering, you can really start to see how it adds depth and character to the helmet. These silver scuffs and scratches add a really nice battle-tested and worn look to the helmet that wouldn't have been there otherwise. It's truly amazing how these small touches can make a helmet look like it's been through countless adventures rather than just coming off of the shelf and being put on. And this is what we're looking at after that first session of scuffing and scratching with the silver rub and buff. You'll notice that the technique that I used focused primarily on just the edges of all of the gray areas. Now it's time to get to the black wash. Not only is this going to act as a detail amplifier, but it will help me achieve the look of an aging helmet. You might have noticed that I had already been utilizing this black wash before the video, and that's because I was making sure that I wasn't adding too much paint to the water so that it wouldn't stain the gray too much. This is the look that I was able to achieve after the initial round of weathering. It's a little bit hard to see on camera, but that black wash does add to the aging effect on the helmet. But the only issue that I ran into was that the face looked good, but the back looked too clean compared to the front. So up on the dome right here and on the back, it was pretty okay, but I do want to add some scuffs and scrapes with this rub and buff again, so we're just going to hit it one more time. And here are some glamour shots of the helmet post-weathering.
It's the next morning now. I weathered last night, about 12 hours ago. Decided to wait overnight to let all that, all the rub and buff and the black wash dry. So now we are finally approaching the last step of the painting process, and that is the final satin clear coat. So I'll be using Rust-Oleum's 2X Ultra Cover Satin Clear. Again, I will link that in the description below. And yeah, after this, we will not have to paint the helmet anymore, and we can work on attaching the detail pieces. So let's get it done. Okay, so we are on the last step of this helmet, which is going to consist of putting in some padding. This is some EVA foam that I got off of Amazon. To attach that on the inside, just going to be using some Gorilla Glue and cutting it with scissors. So I will be lining the sides of the helmet as well as the top of the helmet. After that, we're going to put the visor in and then the earpieces on, and it'll be done. So let's get this padding going. Alright, so here's the padding that I got too. Just a nice, typical helmet shell. Not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it doesn't really matter because it's only going on my head. So, next part of the process is the visor. So let me get that now. Now for the visor, I already cut it out a very long time ago whenever I originally printed this helmet because I had a extra Hobart face shield on hand. So I usually just use the Hobart face shield replacements. I'll put a link in the description. I ordered them off of Amazon, but I did save peeling this plastic off till the end for the installment. So I guess we'll just do that.
And here, I'm just using some Windex to get my fingerprints and smudges off of this visor, so that whenever I put it in, I don't have to worry about them. To put this visor in, there are little slots that are built into the model thanks to Galactic Armory, so you just slide it right in.
Alright, it is now ready for its last step. Got the visor in, as well as all the padding. So the last step is to put on the ears. Now for these earpieces, I'm going to be using something that I haven't used before, but I've heard pretty good things about. It's a 2-part epoxy. Got this at Harbor Freight this morning. I was running out getting sandpaper and I figured I'd give it a try since I guess it's on the stronger side of things to use. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So let's get started on that.
The way that this epoxy works is that it has a double-sided syringe. One side has the actual glue epoxy part and the other side has the hardener. The whole idea is that you dispense them into each other, you stir it up with a stick or something like that, and then you put it on your part and attach it to your helmet, and it should be a really nice strong bond. I'm using tape here to just guarantee that my earpieces don't fall off or wiggle around on the helmet and they stay exactly where I want them to be, and give the epoxy time to dry. Now that these ears have been glued on, we have finally reached the end of this project. I'm so glad that I've been able to share this with y'all, and I hope that y'all have learned something from me today. So without further ado, here are the glamour shots. If you made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around. I'm really happy with how this turned out, and I hope yours can look the same, if not even better. I hope to see you in the next step of this project, so have a great day, and until next time.